So you've just finished a proposal. You know that it's perfect. It's a perfect client. It's a perfect price. You've done everything right. You are so excited and you just can't wait to get that yes. And you press send. And here you are doing your happy dance. Yes, 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 I got this. And then a day goes by, maybe another day, and you check your emails and you're started feeling a little bit like this. But you're still cool because people are busy and you did everything right. They will get back to you for sure. But then another day goes by, maybe another couple of days, end of the second week. How many of you are starting to feel like this? I know, I've been there. Oh my God. Why didn't I put that other image in that portfolio? Oh, that would have sealed the deal. Or why did I charge so much? They probably think I'm insane. Or maybe you even go to, why did I charge so little? They probably think I'm an amateur. All of these things going through your head. What is that? Why do we do it? You just had a visitor. That visitor is the Notorious N.B.G. The negativity bias glitch. Oh yeah. N.B.G. is smooth. His rap is tight. And he's very convincing. He's not just going to remind you about all the problems that you had or what's wrong with this particular proposal. He's going to go and start reminding you about a proposal that you put in a couple of years ago, didn't get that either. And then what about that one a few weeks back that went to your arch rival? And that one that you did and it went really haywire and it was so awful and the client hated it and you hated it. And then it might even take you back to 5th grade, that role in the school pageant that you should have gotten, but it didn't go to you, it went to Just Perfect. That is the job of the Notorious N.B.G. And no, you may not have invited him, but your brain did. Because the Notorious N.B.G. is your brain trying to keep you safe. See, the brain is an amazing organ. It does so much, and its main purpose is to keep our body functioning and to keep you alive and safe. And one of the ways that it tries to do that is to warn you about things that you may have happened in the past that were problematic and that you want to be warned about. So our brain is designed to give much bigger priority to negative experiences and negative events than it does to positive ones. And not only that, but it embeds them really quickly, the negative in our brains, 1/10 of a second. So this is something that probably came in handy evolutionary-wise. And it makes perfect sense. Those guys down by the lower end of the evolutionary tail. So when they were out frolicking with their friends on the tundra, wherever it is that they frolicked, hunting, they may not remember the fact that they had a really great time running, or that they may not remember what the sun felt like beating down on their backs. However, if that friend that they were with got bitten by a snake and died immediately because of the poisonous venom, or if that friend fell into a big hole or over a cliff and was never seen again, now that's something that you're going to want to remember, because you're going to remember the next time you see something that even looks like a snake to stay away from it. And you're going to remember exactly where that hole was, exactly where the edge of the cliff is, so that you don't go falling over. Now, this negativity bias glitch is a great thing to have in those times, and it comes in handy sometimes now because it teaches us not to put our hands in a fire, right? So the negative bias doesn't just remind you of things that happened in the past, events and experiences. It actually goes out looking for threats. So it's almost as if we have our own little secret service department in our brain. And that secret service agent is going out looking for something that is going to be trouble for you, which is great. We thank you very much, Secret Service agent. However, sometimes it gets things wrong, right? Sometimes it looks for a threat when there isn't a threat, like sending that proposal, because we have this little thing in our brain called the amygdala. The amygdala, I like to call the director of security, because it invests 2/3 of its resources to looking and perceiving threats. And so it gets really busy. So it doesn't just send out one Secret Service agent, it sends out a whole platoon of them. It sends out hundreds of them looking for something that's a problem. And when you look for a problem, you're going to find a problem. What can we do? How can we get around that negativity bias glitch? The one thing, and the first thing I'd like you to think about, is to remember or to think about it as a glitch. And a glitch, by its very definition, is a sudden, usually temporary malfunction or irregularity in our equipment. So what happens when another piece of your software malfunctions or gets a glitch? You know, when your phone goes off, what are we always told to do? We're always told to turn it off for a minute and then turn it back on. So one thing you want to do when you are visited by the Notorious N.B.G, try to disconnect, walk away from the computer. Really turn things off. And then when you turn it back on, maybe that glitch will be gone. However, sometimes it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it's not easy to turn your brain off. So here are a couple of other things that you can do. So you want to focus on the present. Get away from the future, what happened, and please get away from the past, because that's what the N.B.G loves, is the past, and then predicting into the future. So stay present. One way you can stay present is to focus on something that is stable and steady and beautiful and awe-inspiring. That will get you right into the present. One of the things I have here by me is these cute little air plants. I love my air plants. They live on air. I have to soak them every once in a while, but look how amazing they are. And just if you focus on something that is stable and steady and beautiful, that will get you back into a calmer place and calm down that N.B.G, calm down the amygdala. Another thing, of course, is to breathe. Take a nice deep breath in, hold it for a little bit, and then easily let it out. You can also slow things down. When you slow things down, you're signaling to your brain that everything is okay. What our brain does when we get anxious is it speeds up. So if you deliberately start to slow things down, your brain will feel much calmer. But I don't want to put you to sleep. So, and let out a sigh of relief. A sigh of relief. Again, your brain is like used to these sigh of relief. It's like, oh, something happened, something good happened. Oh, great. What is it? Yes, everything is much better. Touching your heart, touching the back of the neck. These are places that will calm you down. And then visualize something that you love or someone who loves you. When somebody who loves you and you think about it, oh, okay. So I sent that proposal. I didn't hear back, but my puppy adores me. You know? And then the last is what we're going to focus on today, is to embed a positive experience. The interesting thing is, like I told you, how quickly negative experiences embed in your brain, 1/10 of a second. It takes us focusing on at least 12 seconds on a positive experience so that it will embed in your system and make sense. So the positive experience we're going to embed in our brains today is that positive, amazing, awesome, solid brand story. So when we create a solid brand story, that is going to be something that when the Notorious N.B.G shows up, you're going to put out an APB on that Notorious N.B.G. Your APB is your awesome personal brand. So when you set it out, when you grow that brand and make it as big and as bold and as beautiful as possible, you may not get rid of the NBG because it's, you can't get rid of it. It's part of your brain. It is doing you a service of some kind, but you can shrink it. You can shrink it so that it sits behind that awesome personal brand. And your awesome personal brand is shining, and that little NBG is quietly sitting in the background. So, how do you create an awesome personal brand? We're going to look at that right now through two different filters. We're going to look at it from the filter of your wow factor, and we're going to look at it from the filter of your why. What is your wow? Your wow is what the Notorious N.B.G likes to conveniently forget. Your wow is all of the qualities that make you you, that make you special, all of the wonderful things that you have done in the past leading up. And, the brain doesn't have time for that. It's like, yeah. It's like the frolicking in the tundra with our little evolutionary friends. Yeah, that happened. That was cool. But you know what? What's more important is what danger is out there lurking for you. What we have to do is create the data and remind ourselves constantly of all of our wow factors. What I like to do is have my clients create a wow wallet. You can create a wow journal or a wow spreadsheet, but just collect all of the amazing accomplishments that you've already had, all of the feedback that you've gotten from satisfied customers or clients or agents or reviewers, and collect it. You can do it in the spreadsheet, or you can do what I did recently is I created actual money. It's like I found this money in a dollar store or something. And now I have all of my accomplishments that I wrote on the back, and I have a literal wow wallet, so that whenever I'm feeling a little down or I'm feeling a little less than, or NBG is nipping at my heels, I can take out my wow wallet and read about all this really awesome stuff that I did. Oh, wow. I got booked on 2 segments of a TV show. So these are some of the things that you can do to pump up your wow and plump up your wow wallet. The other thing, if you're worried about what do I put in my wallet? What if it's not enough wow? I don't like bragging about myself. Here's an opportunity for you to do what I like to call a brand audit. What you do is you think about 10 colleagues, clients, agents, mentors, friends, families, anybody that you would like to get feedback from. I suggest about 10. You send them an email. Now you can send them an email, or you can create an anonymous survey on a Google Docs or SurveyMonkey or something like that. And you send it out to the 10 people, and all you do is you ask them one question. And you ask them, when you think of me, what are the first 3 things that come to mind? You can ask them for a list of adjectives or a list of phrases, just three. And then you tell them, I'm working on my personal brand. I would love to know from you, what are the top 3 things that come to mind when you think of me? And then you get that information back and you look through it and you think, oh, wow, it's a wonderful experience. You get some great feedback from. And if it's the stuff that, and you find the stuff that you love, yeah, this is terrific. I love this. And see how consistent is it is. So if you get some information that you don't like, then that's helpful too. You can use that information to say, how can I use that information to more align with my personal brand? I don't want this to be part of my personal brand. Who can I work with? What can I do? How can I switch this up so that I am consistent and am representing the brand that I want to be representing? So please do yourself a favor and do a brand audit, because what happens is our brains are not going to argue with its own data. So you look at all of this information, it's data, and you tell the next time the NBG shows up, it's like, yo, yeah, you remind me of that, but let me remind you of this. I've got all of this stuff in my WOW wallet, and I don't want you arguing with me, okay? Because this is who I am. Then, after you've got your wow taken care of, you want to think of your why, because what you do is not nearly as important as why you do it. When you think about it, if you look around, if you think about all your fellow photographers, what you do is pretty much basically the same. You take amazing images and photos, and some of you have a lot of specialties and all of that. But the what is not as important as the why. Why do you do what you do? Because that why is part of your personal brand. That is part of your awesomeness, and it's part of how it sets you apart. In order to find your why, I'd like you to look at your unique experiences. And to get at your unique experiences, I have these 3 areas that I'd like you to look into. The first area, and the first question you want to ask yourself is, what were you like, or what did you want to be when you were 8 years old? I know for some of you, maybe a ways back, it is for me. Or you may not think, oh, how do I know what I want? And what does that have to do with my personal brand? I cannot tell you how many times I've been working with a client and I ask them that question. And when they dig back and they look and they find this amazing connection to what they wanted to be when they were 8 years old, or who they wanted to be, or where they were, or what they were doing at 8 years old, and they find this amazing connection to what it is that they do now and why it is that they do it that particular way. The other thing I want you to look at is if you've had an experience that defines you, that defines your point of view. I'm going to give you some examples in a moment, but think about an experience that may set you apart. And the third part of your unique experience is, of course, actual experience, any job or hobby or career that you had before or during becoming a photographer. These are 3 areas that are going to help you define your why. And just using myself as an example, my why is closely tied to both one of my careers and what I wanted to be at 8 years old, or who I was at 8 years old. At 8 years old, if you were to meet my family on the street, my mother would have introduced you to her 2 daughters. And she would have said, this is my daughter, Donna. This is my daughter, Shy. Yes, I was so incredibly shy as a child that was my literal nickname. No one knew my real name. And now, how does that impact my brand? I love helping people find their voice, find their passion, express themselves, because I know what it's like to feel like you cannot. And I know what it's like to be there, and I know what it's like to get out of there. The second part of my experience is I was a professional actor for years and years and years. Not only that, but I also wrote for the soaps. So those are some of my experiences. So I know what acting is like. I know what it's like to step out of yourself. I know what writing is like. So I know what it takes to create a character. Those are some of the things that I bring to my work that differentiates myself from other people who do the same thing. That is also part of my why. I never want anybody to be or feel like I felt when I was 8 years old, unable to express myself. So in preparation for this presentation, I also spoke to 5 photographers. When I asked them all these questions, like most people, most of them had the same answers at the top. I want to tell a people's story. I This is your big why of wanting to tell people stories. But that's not deep enough. I wanted to go deeper. And then during the course of the conversation, other things came out which also impacted them. So let's look at them a little bit. When Lyndon was 8 years old, and I love this story, his mother would come home and find out that he had totally rearranged the furniture yet again. It's something that he loved to do. He knew that different configurations of things told different stories, and that's what he was doing at 8 years old. Now, what does he do? He rearranges people's products so that their products tell a wonderful story. Julian wanted to be an Egyptologist. And when I look at her images, there's so many unusual artifacts that she uses in her shoots. And she also travels to very exotic places. It impacts the way that she looks at things. And experiencing wise, John weighed over 300 pounds. And now he works with people who want to be seen. They're speakers and business owners who want to be seen on bigger stages. So what he deals with often is people who have great messages, but aren't that happy about what their image looks like. He has a way now to relate to them. And Brett, I love the idea with Brett because Brett had a wonderful bar mitzvah, right? No photographer. There was no photographer. So there's no record of his bar mitzvah. What did he do with his bar mitzvah money? He bought a camera, his first camera, and he took his first long trip to London. Those are two events that totally impact what he does today, making sure that events are photographed, and he does a lot of travel photography. And for John, again, he was a TV producer, but not just a TV producer. He was a producer for the Maury Povich show. So you can imagine how quickly he had to turn over information. So that's a selling point. That's a differentiator. One of his whys, he knows that you don't have to anguish over an image. He just wants to get it out to you. Not only that, but he also has an experience of knowing how to dig into other people's stories, the stories that aren't as obvious, and those are the photographs that he takes. And once you have your why, then you want to think about your customer, your client. You want to think about the why behind what you're doing for them. Why are they hiring you? Why do they want to be photographed? And they want it because there's something that they want to get out of it. So you want to think about that why too. How do they want to feel? What do they want to experience? What do they want to know after they see this picture? What do they want to realize? What do they want to see? So depending on the client, you really want to get into their heads and think about one of these 5 things so that by the end of the shoot, I want my client to know this. I want my client to see this. I want my client to realize how amazing they are. So I love looking at these 2 logos for Volvo and for BMW. They're both automobiles. They will both get you to Philadelphia from New York in probably about the same amount of time. They might even take the same amount of gas. However, people who buy Volvos are completely different than people who buy BMWs. They buy them for different reasons. They buy them for different whys. Why do people buy Volvo? Usually people will buy Volvo because they want to feel safe. Why do people buy BMWs? Because they want to experience luxury. They want to experience feeling luxurious and feeling important. Volvo, I want to feel safe. I want to feel responsible. BMW, I want to feel important. Very different. Same vehicle gets you the same place, but different whys, different brands, different brand stories. So let's look at our 4 photographers. Like I said, Lyndon now works with his producers or his clients who are product-based, and he lets them know that yes, inanimate objects can tell a story. It's all about how they're arranged. And with John, he wants people to feel just as important as the message that they're giving. He wants them to feel good about how they look, and he knows how to do that. He knows how to talk to them about that. With Brett, of course, like I mentioned before, he's never going to want to have you leave an event without knowing that you have a record of it, knowing that you have a legacy of it, and knowing that each moment is going to be captured and kept. And with Jillian, she was an interior designer. So as an interior designer, she was responsible for creating a mood from top to bottom, from the wallpaper to the upholstery to the paint to all of that. And now what she does as a photographer, she also helps you produce so that your image is realized from the beginning to the end so that they can see the entirety of their brand in one or two photos. Knowing your unique experiences is going to give you a more solid brand story, something that you can have in a conversation, you can put on your website, you can market in social media. Those are all the ways that you can use that unique experience to tell your brand story. Because your why is the one thing that differentiates yourself from others who do the same what. Your client wants to know why you over somebody who may do similar things. That's the reason that they choose you. So what is your story? What is your story? How can you put together your experience as a child, your other experiences, your hobbies, your careers? How do they blend together to tell a story? Now, I know a lot of you are saying that maybe I tell my story through my images. My work speaks for myself. But that's not really enough because your work is the images of somebody else. When I'm talking about your story, it's the story that represents you, who you are as an individual, who you are as a brand. And you want to put it in the form of a story because stories are so incredibly impactful. Our brain listens through story. It takes in information, it learns through story. And they recently found out in brain science that when you're listening to a story, your whole brain is at work together. And one of the very few times that almost all pieces of your brain are working together. And that shows that a story has a much deeper impact than anything else. So get your story together and figure out how to share it with your clients. The other thing that story does is it taps on emotion. And it is so important to know that logic tells, emotion sells. Now, your images may be all full of emotion and wonderful things, but a lot of times, I bet you, some of you, when you're talking to a prospect or a client, you start talking to them about the what, the logical part of your business, the cost, the amount of images that they'll get for the package, how long the shoot will be, what the area or the situation is, what the studio looks like, the turnaround time. Those are the kinds of things that you talk about. Those are the logic. Those are the what. Yeah, people do care about those. I'm not saying that they don't, but they won't care about them unless they're emotionally engaged with you. So you want to engage them emotionally with your story because that's how our brain makes decisions. Our brains make decisions for emotional reasons, and then we use the logic to back up the decision that we made based on our emotion. So yes, the pricing and the amount of shots and the amount of time are definitely important. And they're only important after I've actually been engaged and decide to work with you based on our emotional connection. So please remember that. Logic tells, emotion sells. And there are certain emotions that are triggered in different people for different reasons at different walks of life. As far as selling, as far as engaging, I have a list of 32 reasons that people will engage, 32 emotional reasons people will engage in your services or make a sale or buy from you. Now, I don't have time to list all 32 of those reasons, but I'm going to give you the top 5. And the top 5 encompass a lot of the other smaller ones. The top 5 are these: wealth, safety, and security, health, love and sex, family legacy, self-actualization. Now, as photographers, a lot of people, when I asked the photographers that I interviewed, they all fell into around the self-actualization part. And yes, that's part of it, especially when you're doing lifestyle and portrait, people want to be actualized. But there are other emotional triggers that you can connect with when you're talking or communicating or marketing to your client. So self-actualization is one, but of course, if you're a family photographer, it's family and legacy. Really communicate to them what it means to have a legacy. Brett could actually use that. It's like, I didn't have a photographer at my bar mitzvah, and every time I think about it, I get so upset. So that's a selling point of really talking about family and legacy. And also, I know some of you probably for love and sex. I want this portrait because I want to put it on Tinder and I want a relationship, so that is a need, an emotional need. How can you market? How can you talk? How can you create a story, create a brand story around connecting with that person on that emotional need? Wealth and safety, you might look at that and think, oh, that's not part of me, but yes, it is. I have a friend who's a photographer who works with only high-end people, and even my friend John, who works with speakers and in business brands. Wealth is part of that because they want to look like they are super successful. So wealth and raising their fees or raising their prices is a big driver. So I can then talk to you about how, by creating a great image for you, you will be able to command higher fees. So those are some of the needs that people have around their emotions and how you can, and start thinking about ways that you can connect what it is that you do with their emotional needs. Because once that connects, then they are emotionally involved. Then you talk logic, it makes perfect sense. You've got a sale. So these are some of the things that your brand story can touch on, not only in the conversation, but the way that you put your story together, put it on the web, market, and all that. Now, here is an example of a brand story all put together. Anj Olson. I know some of you may know her because she's a PPA member, and I know that she's a mentor here as well. And so when I asked Anj wanted to be a journalist or a children's author. And her experience, she was a motherhood, and she has 3 boys. So she is really steeped in motherhood. And job and hobby, she was actually trained as a scientist. She has a science degree. She was supposed to be a nutritional biologist, and she couldn't do it. She had this creative bent that she went towards it first. Aren't we lucky? And her emotional need, she meets the needs of family and legacy and self-actualization, because and that comes out when you look at her why, to cut through the mess of motherhood and to celebrate the true relationship connection and joy. So what Anj does is she lets mothers off the hook. She does everything for them. She does the wardrobe, she does the fitting, she puts them where they need to be. So she wants to take the stress that she knows is part of motherhood, alleviate that stress for the time being. And when you look at what she has on her website, her story encapsulates all of her experiences so really well. She talks about love of reading. She talks about this came because of thinking about a children's story. She wanted to be a children's author. She talks about her being a mother to boys, a brood of boys. She talks about being a passionate storyteller. And she uses some phrases that I know are part of her scientific thinking, like life defining and developing and all of those things. And the fact that she can curate shoots like she does is part of her scientific mind that she can then use to differentiate herself even more. So there are so many ways that you can use your awesome personal brand in the marketing, in the storytelling, on your website, in the conversations. However, you need a little bit more than that. So you want to know how to boost your brand. Yes, putting it on the website. Yes, having a great social media presence. Those are really important things. And maybe sending out portfolios, all of that. But whether you have an agent, whether you have a manager, whether you have a rep, you are still your brand logo. You want to make sure that you are showing up and representing your brand 100%. Nike can't afford to put that swoosh on a pair of shoes that are going to fall apart. Starbucks can't afford to put their logo on a cup of watered down, weak coffee. So, how are we showing up when you're at those I know we can't do a lot of networking now, but even the virtual networking, how are you showing up? How are you sounding? All of that is also part of your personal brand. It's one thing to have it rock solid. You can take all my advice, and I know there are a lot of branding experts at this conference. You can take all of their advice and use it, and it be fabulous. But if you show up to an event and you don't represent, that's a little bit of a problem, because how you are perceived is how you are received, which impacts what you can achieve. Now, you all want to achieve a lot, I'm sure. So let's go back and think about how we are being perceived. And perception is two things. One is your brand perception. Then there's the physical perception of how they experience you when you are in the room. And there are three things that go into how people perceive you physically when you're in the room. And those three things are the three V's of communication: the verbal, the visual, and the vocal. What is said? So what is said is what we were talking about and dealing with all along the line. What is your brand story? What is your personal brand? What are those expertise? All of those things. That's all the verbal things that you can put out and market to the cows come home. The visual, of course, that also deals with the visual of your images and the website and all that, but I'm talking about your personal visual, your personal logo, your walking in the room logo. You want to make sure that that is strong too. You want to make sure the visual posture and the way that you come off is strong too. I was at a networking event a few years back, and I was talking to this woman who seemed to be a really great artist. So I was really curious to see her work. Now, and she opened up her portfolio and showed me, and it was gorgeous. It was this bright, vibrant, colorful paintings. And I looked up at her. She was wearing a black dress and I think pearls, and dressed extremely, everything else was extremely conservative. And I looked down at her portfolio and I looked up at her and I looked at her portfolio and I'm like, this doesn't match. And I told her, if I hadn't seen your portfolio, I would have had an image, completely different image of what your work looked like. Now, I'm not saying that she had to go running around looking totally colorful all the time, but I would love to have had some indication of the type of artist that she was, some spark of color, some spark of boldness, because then I would make it consistent in my mind with her, and then I would remember her more vividly because she was representing her work more vividly and more consistently. Same with the voice. I mean, if you're talking to someone about your work, you want to sound like you're confident. You want to sound like you believe in yourself. And I'm a real stickler of this. I have a vocal workout CD on my website because that can, especially on virtual or on the phone, you're talking to somebody on the phone and they see your images and they love your images. but they really can't even understand what you're saying because you're speaking so low, or you make everything sound like a question, so it sounds like you're really insecure, or you have a monotone and you sound like you would bore them to tears in the middle of a shoot. So vocal is also extremely important way to consistently represent yourself. Now, one isn't more important than the other. The consistency is what's important, because our brain, just like we have negativity bias, we have bias to believe what we see and we hear over the words, the actual words that are coming out of our mouths. So if I have my druthers and I read something or I heard something that was really fantastic, but then I met you and you didn't look successful, you didn't sound confident, I might not believe what I read. I might not even believe the referral that I heard, because my bias is to take in information that I see and hear and give that much more weight. So how can you be consistent with the way that you boost, the way that you promote, the way that you talk about your brand? Well, how can you be more consistent with the way that you market your brand? Because here's my absolute favorite quote: "What you do speaks so loud, I cannot hear what you say." Oftentimes with the tone of our voice or the twitch that we may have, or something that we're doing, can get in the way of a prospect or a client being able to actually hear what we have to say. So make sure that you're being consistent with your brand. And the other thing that being consistent does, and you're working on your voice and your body language does, is it gives you confidence. And confidence opens doors. When NBG is nipping at your heels, sometimes it takes a toll on your confidence. I know, I get it. So you've got your brand, but I got one more trick for you to try. And that is to create an avatar for yourself. What's an avatar? An avatar, and some people call it an alter ego. In fact, there's a gentleman named Todd Herman who wrote a great book called Alter Ego. And for years, I have been sharing this exercise with my clients, because having an alter ego is what got me from being shy to being able to speak to hundreds of thousands of people. Now, what happened with me is, like, I decided to audition for a play, go crazy, shy, call me crazy. Shy decided to audition for a play. I got the part, but as an actor, every time I was acting, I was actually reprogramming the neurons in my brain, because every habit in every personality, every characteristic is existing because we are in the habit of doing the same two things over and over and over again. So there was one pathway that was my shy pathway. And as I started acting as if I were someone else, acting in another character who was much bolder, more confident than I was, I started to knit together pathway for my neurons that was a little bit different, a little bit non-shy. So that pathway got stronger and stronger, so I could walk down that pathway. And now I can step on a stage and I have that pathway. Not to mention that the shy pathway is not completely overgrown, but now I have options. I can go in my confident pathway and feel totally comfortable. So that's what creating an avatar or creating an alter ego can do for you. And you want to really get into it. You maybe give it a different name. You may want to give it an artifact that only that alter ego has. Whenever you go to a networking event, or whenever you go look at a rep or a new client, you put on your alter ego cape. But it may not be a cape. It may be a special jacket. It may be a special tie. It may be a pair of glasses. It may be an earring set or a necklace. Something that represents that really bold, confident alter ego that is the bigger, bolder, and better you. Now, don't just take my word for it. It's been done, and you know someone who's done it super successfully. So if you're feeling shy, what you want to think about and who you want to think about is our Queen Bee, Beyonce. Many of you have heard, I'm sure, that Beyonce is naturally or was naturally very, very shy. And she needed to create an alter ego so that she could go out on stage and perform like the superstar that she is today. So she created Sasha Fierce. Sasha Fierce has a whole different name, a whole different look. She can work sexy and she can go out and be Beyonce on stage. Beyonce can go home at night and be the shy Beyonce, you know? So this is what you really want to think about. Who is your Sasha Fierce? How can you create a Sasha Fierce that is fierce enough to rock that personal brand? Now, you may be thinking, is she saying fake it till you make it? Not really, because personally, I hate that phrase. Because who wants to be a fake? Who wants to think of themselves as a fake? Who wants to represent themselves as a fake? Who wants to do business with somebody who thinks and represents themselves as a fake? So I've switched that up a little bit. I like to say, instead of fake it till you make it, own it while you hone it. Because I truly believe that we are all on this planet to own the special gifts that we have. For you, it's whatever creative photography that you were born to do. And that's why I take personal branding so personally, because I want you to own the gifts that you were given so that the next time this guy shows up, what are you going to do? We learn that you're going to turn off, get quiet, meditate, think of the present, only the present, forget the past, forget the future. Then you're going to pull out your WOW wallet or your WOW journal or your WOW spreadsheet, and you're going to read through all of the awesome things that you've already done. And you're going to read all of the awesome feedback that you've gotten from other people. You're going to look at that data that's going to negate some of that N.B.G data. And then you're going to step into your APB, your awesome personal brand. And if you're not quite comfortable in that brand yet, what are you going to do? You're going to rock your Sasha Fierce. You're going to find that avatar that speaks to you, and you're going to bust through, take the stage, and own who it is that you are. So thanks so much for tuning in. It's been my pleasure. Can't wait to answer your questions. I want to give a shout out to some of the photographers that I was able to interview